Full disclosure, the voice you are listening to now is artificially generated, brought to you by satisphonic.com. See the link in the description for more details. Who won in court but lost in the court of public opinion? Ken McElroy, the Skidmore, Missouri town bully. His rap sheet included assault, statutory rape, child molestation, arson, animal cruelty, hog and cattle rustling, and burglary. Never convicted, one day he was shot and killed in broad daylight on a busy street. Nobody saw who did it, cough cough. Escaped conviction 20 times. Edit, corrected, 21 indictments, 1 conviction. And this was right after the sheriff told the assembled mob not to do anything stupid, and then told the mob he had to go out of town right now for a couple of hours. I will add he was shot in front of like 150 people, but everyone who was interviewed by police said I was too busy finding cover alone. As he sat drinking at the bar, word got back to the men at the Legion Hall that he was in town. Sheriff Estes instructed the assembled group not to get into a direct confrontation with McElroy, but instead seriously consider forming a neighborhood watch program. Estes then drove out of town in his police cruiser. He knew what the fuck was about to go down and wanted no part of it. I can only imagine how much hatred can be held for one man that an entire town unanimously agrees to whack him, and even the police just let it happen. Granted, they tried to figure who did it, but I imagine it was more of, did you see the shooter? No. Okay. Have a nice day. Next. In 1980, Lindy Chamberlain, Crichton was charged for the murder death of her daughter, Azaria Chamberlain. They had been camping in the Australian bush when the baby disappeared. She claimed the dingo had taken her child, but the public thought that was preposterous. Despite locals who regularly camped in the area and indigenous people that lived there saying there were many dingo lairs nearby and that the creatures were extremely dangerous. They did little to no follow-up, and she was convicted because the public thought she behaved weirdly after the baby death by doing things like smiling at a pleasant memory during the memorial. Not only that, she became a laughingstock around the world with the term, "The dingo ate my baby," making it into shows as big as Seinfeld at the time. Years later, they found a dingo lair with scraps of Azaria's clothes because, shockingly, the people who live and regularly camp in the area actually know more than the police and general public and were correct. She was released from prison and her name was cleared, but she'll have to live the rest of her life knowing her baby was taken from her and the world treated her like a murderous clown. This and the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit are a major lesson in how nobody should ever take what the media says about a case at face value. I have no idea how people could find it so unbelievably outlandish that a wild dog could attack a child. Right, domestic dogs attack and kill children, but a wild dog for some reason couldn't. Apparently the expert they called in was from the UK or something and had no interactions with dingoes. All the people, especially indigenous people from that area, were like, yeah, this has happened before. They went through such lengths to discredit her. The way Stella Liebeck, the woman who was the plaintiff in the McDonald's coffee case, was treated in an incredibly shameful manner by the national media. We wonder why corporations have all the power in America. There's why, in a nutshell, they completely control the narrative outside of the lawsuit. From Wikipedia, Liebeck went into shock and was taken to an emergency room at a hospital. She suffered third-degree burns on 6% of her skin and lesser burns over 16%. 1413, she remained in the hospital for 8 days while she underwent skin grafting. During this period, Liebeck lost 20 pounds, 9.1 kg, nearly 20% of her body weight, reducing her to 83 pounds, 38 kg. After the hospital stay, Liebeck needed care for 3 weeks, which was provided by her daughter. Liebeck suffered permanent disfigurement after the incident and was partially disabled for 2 years. I don't care what anyone says. No cup of coffee should cause that kind of damage. I have the term fused labia seared into my brain because of that story. Fused labia, anytime this story comes up in conversation, I always set the record straight and mention it outright. I've heard people say, well, I didn't need to know that. Why not? You were ready to casually throw her under the bus. You should at least know what happened to her. People change their tune real quick when they learn the physical toll it took on that poor woman. I've heard people say, well, I didn't need to know that. Yes, you did. It's integral to internalizing the horrors that corporations like McDonald's are willing to put people through. Unfortunately, her letting McDonald's get away with it was likely a combination of a gag order being written into the settlement so she couldn't speak publicly about the case, and the fact that the lawsuit took so long and she was so badly injured that she couldn't face another lawsuit for the defamation McDonald's was performing. I do know that she never fully recovered, and most of the money was used to pay for a 24-hour live-in career for the last few years of her life due to the injury. You're forgetting that there were many other victims' complaints prior to her, and McDonald's basically did not care. The coffee was served overheated beyond reasonable safety standards. Jennifer Connell was called the worst aunt ever and the aunt from hell for suing her nephew. Her nephew basically jumped into her arms, and the extra physical affection broke her arm. Became a really big deal when it happened. Thing is, she needed to name a person at fault for her injury, for her insurance, and named her nephew with his parents' permission. She wasn't actually suing her nephew, just getting insurance money so she could be treated. The lawsuit was wholly initiated by the insurance companies since her injuries were being paid for by the kid's parents' homeowners liability insurance policy. That's a pretty normal thing, but the media got wind and all hell broke loose. This woman just wanted her medical bills paid. So many of these crazy court case stories have medical expenses at the bottom of it. Old lady suing McDonald's over coffee, just wanted her medical expenses, etc., etc. She received traumatic third-degree burns across her entire genital area because at the time they would serve the coffee near boiling with the idea it would cool down as you drove to wherever you were going to drink it. She was only trying to get her medical bills paid and sued when they refused. The phrase fused labia is enough for me to know she deserves all the money ever. I hate this type of story on the news because it's never accurate. I worked as a legal assistant at a law firm that represented defendants in this sort of lawsuit. In most of these cases, the person suing has nothing to do with it other than being named on the lawsuit and having to give a deposition. Their insurance company is suing for reimbursement for medical expenses. In these cases, the injured person doesn't have any choice in the matter and doesn't actually see money. It goes to the insurance company. Instead, they spend a few months or years of their life missing work or depositions, court appearances, and meetings with lawyers on top of recovery for their injury. In many cases, the person being sued is in the same boat, with their insurance company providing the lawyer and paying out if they lose. It's a messed up system, and I left burnt out because no one is winning but the insurance company and lawyers. Richard Jewell, the man falsely accused of the Centennial Olympic Park bombings in Atlanta in 1996. He was a security guard and saved dozens of lives by spotting the bomb and clearing spectators. The FBI noted him as a person of interest, and his name was dragged through the mud by local and national media. While the FBI stopped investigating Jewell by October of that year, it wasn't until a couple of years later that his name was truly cleared when Eric Rudolph, the actual bomber, was caught. Jewell sued a number of media outlets and settled with a few of them for an undisclosed amount. No good deed goes unpunished. People like to say this, but often it's just that good deeds go unrewarded. Last year, my neighbor a few houses down came screaming out of her house with her 3-year-old unconscious in her arms, begging for help, swimming her limp child around. My wife flew out the front door to provide keeper or first aid if needed. It was immediately apparent that the kid had a seizure. She got the mother to put the girl on the ground and rolled her on her side. I kept the dad calm and made sure an ambulance was called, and my wife provided all the information to the EMPs when they arrived. That was about a year ago, and the parents never so much as say hello when we pass. I'm epileptic. Usually I have seizures at home, but one time I had a seizure on the bus. There is very little more humiliating than waking up groggy, licking a bus floor, pain in every muscle and a dislocated shoulder, and seeing people climb over your stiff, exhausted body because the bus is halted. The bus driver, Ian, sat me up and looked after me. He managed to call an emergency contact and get me some help. He waited with me for an ambulance to arrive. He made sure I was safe. I was apologetic. Of course, it's not my fault that I had a seizure on the bus, but I was sorry that it was delaying his day and adding some logistics issues to the rest of his shift. He just shrugged it off, promised it wasn't a big deal, told me that it can happen to anyone. A few days later, I camped out the bus stop, keeping an eye on if he was driving that day. I bought him a lovely bottle of whiskey and a thank you card. We also found out that my brother worked with his wife, so he now gets a Christmas card. I don't think I will ever forget how much care he showed me. It was mostly just keeping me company, but I felt so safe. It pains me to know that your wife hasn't had even a lick of gratitude, because it sounds like she deserves that. You're very sweet to do all that. At the time, the parents said she wasn't epileptic that they knew of, and it had never happened before. So I'm sure they just have no idea how to approach it. I'm sure, like others have said, it was a traumatic day, and they would rather try to just forget about the whole thing. I had a similar experience. Edited. Saving a kid at the beach. When people say no good deed goes unpunished, they are usually referring to when doing the right thing has negative consequences, like with Richard Jewell. He saved lives and became a suspect. Your and my example are different. Exactly. The saying is for situations like in The Incredibles, where Mr. Incredible gets sued by the man whose life he saved, because in saving his life he severely injured him. I can sort of see the psychology behind this. They might have some lingering anxiety or even embarrassment at having people they don't know well see them at their lowest and most vulnerable. Avoidance of discomfort is hardwired into most people. There can also be an anxiety spiral that goes. Nothing I could ever say to these people could possibly measure up to the gratitude I owe them. Anything I say is going to sound trite or insufficient, so I won't say anything. They might just be ungrateful and ungracious, but humans are messy and trauma makes us messier. Absent actual bad behavior, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially when I've seen them terrified and raw on their worst day. That case in Mexico, where a rapist was acquitted of rape because he didn't enjoy it. I guess the rapist's dad, being a top cartel honcho, had nothing to do with it then. The dingo took my baby woman, which turned out to be true as well. Lindy Chamberlain. That woman went through so much trauma, almost entirely due to media sensationalism. Not only did she lose her daughter, she lost years of her other kids' childhoods, her marriage, her freedom, etc. She gave birth to a child while incarcerated and was in prison for another 2-3 years after that child was born, which is just fucking heartbreaking. Lindy Chamberlain didn't win in court at first. She was falsely convicted of her daughter Azaria's murder and spent 3 years in prison over it. She got dragged over the coals hard by the media, to the point where they were saying that Azaria's name had something to do with sacrifices in the wilderness. As an Australian, I can take a joke, but on some degree. I can't deny it. It infuriates me that this case has become a stereotype. Like it's a real thing that happened. A woman's baby was taken into the dead of night and eaten by a wild animal while they were out camping, and then she had to serve years in prison because, thanks to the media and tabloids, everyone thought she was some weird religious freak who murdered her daughter in a ritual sacrifice. They only even found out she was innocent because some British guy fell to his death and happened to be in the general area next to the crucial piece of missing evidence, Azaria's bloody jacket. Didn't it take decades before they could even get an official cause of death? Over 30 years. Finally, a coroner supported the parents' version in 2012. Meanwhile, anyone who's ever worked with wildlife saw the totally ridiculous that dingoes would see what amounts to a small prey item and stalk it so they can drag it out and eat it, and shook our heads in disbelief. There was nothing about that story that sounded infeasible from the beginning. Dingoes are not insane man-eaters, but every predator takes its opportunities. If I recall correctly, they were camping in the bush, which is a perfect place for a predator who usually avoids humans to see that opportunity. To assume that she must have killed her child was insane to me, and still drives me bonkers to this day. That poor woman. From what I've read, the Aborigines who lived in the area said the same, that dingoes would definitely do that, and it had happened before. But why would the authorities listen to the native people who had been there forever? The City of New London in KLO v City of New London. The city was using the eminent domain to remove a nice lady from her home to build shopping complex. Made its way to the Supreme Court and a 5v4 decision won, and KLO lost her home to provide economic opportunity. High-profile case where the public sided with KLO, but the courts sided with the city. Worst part, the developers skipped town not too long after the trial, and now that lady's home is an abandoned construction lot as of a few years ago. Like an orange, as Lindy Chamberlain herself infamously said in an interview, the unemotional delivery of which being one factor that sealed the public perception of her as the murderer of her own child. She didn't grieve how she was opposed to because she wasn't wailing in public. Never mind that any half-competent therapist will tell you that there is no standard way to grieve. Jesse Ventura sued Chris Kyle for defamation, but after Chris's death, the lawsuit continued and people smeared Jesse for suing a dead man's wife. Jesse eventually got a settlement. Also, Chris Kyle was a notorious liar. He claimed the government stationed him on top of the Superdome during Katrina to shoot looters, which would be murder that he's just admitting to. It's amazing that his life and confirmed accomplishments are enough to write an interesting book. Why lie so much? O.J. Simpson. He did lose the wrongful death civil trial, but Ye sure beat the criminal rap. This has more to do with the burden of proof. No, it's considerably lower in a civil case. Yes, the difference in proof beyond a reasonable doubt and a preponderance of the evidence is huge. Then had the balls to write, and if I did it book. He should have been taken out after that brazen act. The juice is on the loose. He'll find the real murderer one day. Praise the heavens he's still committed to finding the killer after all these years have passed. Reminds me of that Family Guy bit where Peter is talking to John Bennett Ramsey's parents and swears he won't stop until he finds the killer. Then the parents are like, "Oh no, that's okay. Please don't bother." Lol. Rip Norm MacDonald. Hey, careful with that. That's my lucky stabbing hat. Casey Anthony. I still get so effing infuriated to this day. Everyone failed that poor baby. I can't believe how she used Firefox, but they searched her Internet Explorer history. It's baffling to me that in the process of searching her history, they somehow, though Firefox wasn't a web browser. Fucking stupid. Even worse. They found the incriminating searches, but they didn't tell prosecutors who never knew about them. Wookman reported that sheriff's investigators overlooked over 1,200 entries, including the suffocation search from the computer's Mozilla Firefox browser, which was most commonly used by Casey Anthony. Investigators also pulled 17 vague entries from the computer's Internet Explorer browser. Whoever conducted the Google search looked for the term foolproof suffocation site, and then clicked on an article about suicide that discussed taking poison and putting a bag over one's head, the station reported. The browser then recorded activity on the social networking cyberspace, which was used by Casey Anthony, but not her father. Sadly, people still don't see to understand the internet. I was at a trial once where the defense attorney kept grilling a witness about an Instagram post she made, except the photo provided was not of an id post at all. I'm the Murder series. Our officer states I couldn't pinpoint the time of the post because too many people commented on it, and I could scroll up enough. I was baffled. Every social media post has a timestamp. Every social media company has a legal office I'm sure police can call. It was either pure laziness or incompetence, or both. This case is absolutely insane. Almost every single time I hear about it, it is never about Kaylee, always Casey. That little girl always seems to just fade into the background of her mother and her bullshit shenanigan. She lied and lied and lied, and still, people weren't sure if she killed Kaylee. She was found with tape over her mouth. I didn't kill that baby! They had that trial on at the salon I was getting my hair cut at when the verdict was read. Those women, armed with scissors and razors, and now very angry, were the most dangerous assemblage of human beings on earth at that moment. My stylist told me she had to calm down before finishing my cut. When I was 13, I was getting my hair cut at a barber I had not gone to before. I had told him how I wanted my hair cut at the beginning. In the middle of my cut, he got into an argument with his boss about his paycheck. He did not stop cutting my hair and apparently forgot what I wanted done. So he started shaving the sides of my head. After the argument was over with his boss, I think he regained his composure and realized what he did. But the damage was done and I came out of the barber as a 13-year-old simple jack. When I got home, I had my older brother shave the rest of my head so I wouldn't be ridiculed at school. I can't fathom how she got away with it when there's innocent people who go to jail, wrongly convicted with way less evidence than her case. Infuriates me. The fucking cops only looked at her Internet Explorer browser history. Her Mozilla history was full of how do I kill a baby shit. No, I am not joking. If you watch the trial, and only the trial, there is no way a jury could have convicted. This was a murder which has no statute of limitations, and they botched the whole thing. I recall hearing that she admitted to it in some capacity sometime after the verdict as well, because they didn't produce any fucking evidence at the trial that she committed murder. They didn't even prove the kid was murdered. You have to connect the dots or you can't sustain a conviction. This is lawyer 101 shit. Here they charged her with first-degree murder without even having a cause of death. This is the reason she got off. Jeff Ashton, the prosecutor, was overzealous in the charges. I wholeheartedly believe she would have been convicted if the charge was second-degree murder, manslaughter, or even negligent homicide instead of first-degree murder. She also had the best lawyer ever. That guy could have gotten Chris Watts a not guilty verdict. Shit, he got Aaron Hernandez off a double murder charge. If you ever do something bad, hire that dude. It was the negligence of the police force. How do you search her computer, but only search her Internet Explorer history and not Mozilla? She literally Googled how to kill her child. Bill Cosby. I literally forget sometimes that his conviction was overturned and vacated, till he isn't still in prison, and that his conviction was overturned. Had no idea. Note it was overturned not because he wasn't guilty. He is. But because he effectively got tricked into violating his own rights by the prosecutors legally agreeing to not use his testimony against him, then doing so anyway. Mason Greenwood, 19-year-old, raped his girlfriend and audio of it was leaked. After 18 months, the case was dropped and he was shipped off to play for a Spanish club. The audio is bad too, really bad. Her parents also pressured her afterwards to let it go and refuse to be a witness if it went to court. She's expecting his kid now, I believe. Really sad case. They're married now, I believe. Engaged. He broke a court order to stay away from her, weaseled his way back into her life. Textbook abuser behavior. There was also a court order for Mason to not see his ex, which he broke, and in that time convinced her to get back together with him. She decided not to be a witness in the case, and as a result it had to be dropped. She has already had their child. People act like she wouldn't take him back if it was the truth. No, he wouldn't take her back if it was a lie. Victims go back to their abusers every damn day. Psychologists say it takes an average of 7 attempts to actually leave. Why would a guy get back with a woman who falsely accused him of rape? O.G. Casey Anthony. Debatably Carla Homolka, too, cause she got a ridiculously light sentence. Kay made a plea deal to put Bernardo away for life before they knew the extent of her involvement. She never should have been allowed out. It blows my mind how light her sentence was considering. The jury had to watch the videos she and Paul Bernardo made of them raping and inadvertently killing her unconscious sister. Monica Lewinsky. She won in court because she wasn't the person on trial. The power dynamics also weren't in her favor. He was her boss. But yet we still call it the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and her name is still brought up in derogatory ways after all these years. Well, if you called it a Bill Clinton sex scandal, that really wouldn't narrow it down. It blows my mind how light her sentence was considering. The jury had to watch the videos she and Paul Bernardo made of them raping and inadvertently killing her unconscious sister. The woman who won a damages settlement from McDonald's for being burned by overly hot coffee. It was dangerously hot, and they'd been warned before and paid medical bills by court order over other burns, but because she got a high payout over something as seemingly trivial as coffee, she's labelled litigious and dramatic. The burns were awful. And by the way, McDonald's still has coffee that's dangerously hot. They were in the news a week or two ago for another burn case. The phrase in her medical record was fused labia to leg, and the pics are online. Don't look at them. The pics are online. Don't look at them. I wonder how many people didn't heed your warning. At least I did. Usually when someone says pics of some crazy things are online, my curiosity won't let me not look them up. But there is no way I'm looking that one up. I just did, and that's absolutely horrifics. I would have plastered the photos on every news site and article I could find to combat the narrative they pushed that it was frivolous. That poor woman, she couldn't. I read once that part of the settlement was a one-way non-disclosure and non-disparagement. She wasn't allowed to say anything at all, but McDonald's could say whatever they wanted. So they did things like pay hosts of the late shows to make fun of the lawsuit. They made her a joke and she couldn't do anything about it. That shouldn't be legal. I think she just wanted them to pay the medical bills, but they refused and ended up paying more. It's pretty darn hot coffee to cause significant burn. Yes, she asked for $10 for her medical bills and McDonald's said no. The millions that she was awarded were punitive damages determined by the judge. Actually, jury. The judge reduced the punitive damages afterwards. She didn't ask for much, just for her medical bills to cover. But the jury, a group of 12 average people, was so pissed off at McDonald's they wanted to fine McDonald's $1 million. Third-degree burn to 6% of her body. That part of her body being in and around the groin, it doesn't really do justice to the damage. It fused her labia together because it was so hot. How the hell do you make coffee that hot? McDonald's did it because they believed people got coffee at the drive-thru and then drink it when they get to work, so their rationale was to make it ridiculously hot. McDonald's required their franchises to keep coffee between 180 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Many people had been burned before, but they refused to change the policy. That poor woman spent 8 days in the hospital because of the burn. McDonald's went into full prayer mode, and she was the target of late-night TV shows monologue, and people still mistakenly use that as an example of a frivolous lawsuit. They also found that they save a lot of money by making the coffee hotter because it stays fresh for longer. The amount of money they save in coffee outweighs the amount of damages they need to pay in the burn cases, so they just continue to serve it hot as fuck. Not just that. McDonald's prayer team went into overdrive to discredit her, having piss following her, harassing her at work and home, keeping her under constant surveillance, blasting her in fake news releases when it was harder to fact-check sources. I believe she settled because she's starting thinking pretty seriously she might get killed by accident. There's a documentary about the events that came out 3 years ago. It's fascinating. She couldn't find work for tears after, and mysterious references would reveal additional information to potentials, employers that get her blacklisted. Oh, and the coffee was so hot, it fused her 2 legs together. I've unfortunately seen the pics, and that lady clearly was not exaggerating or lying about any of her claim. McDonald's corporate forces owners to keep coffee at volcano levels so that it'd still be hot no matter how long after ordering you consume it. Solid fault-proof logic, eh? 'Cause we all make the detour for McDonald's to sample their precious coffee. Woof, corporate America. John Delarayan, he was set up by the FBI, and his case is the reason for the term entrapment. He was acquitted of all charges. Delarayan needed $17 million to save his company from collapse. To this end, he spent much of 1982 desperately seeking investors for his failing company. He was approached by one such investor named James Hoffman on June 28, 1982, who claimed to have a business opportunity to help save Delarayan's company. Unknown to Delarayan, James Hoffman was actually a convicted drug smuggler who, in exchange for leniency, struck a deal with federal authorities to become an informant. Brock the Rapist Turner arguably won given his sentencing. Ethan Couch, the affluenza kid, edit. I was wrong. Brock the Rapist Turner now goes by Alan the Rapist Turner. Sorry for the confusion. The explanation I heard was that Couch's sentence was in essence a trap. As a juvenile, had he been convicted, his slate would have been wiped clean on adulthood. 10 years of probation was pretty much a guarantee that he'd violate it and that he'd be treated as an adult when that happened. So on the whole was the way the judge had available to make his life as complicated as possible. Are we talking about notorious rapist Alan Turner, formerly known as notorious rapist Brock Turner? To influence Google search results again, I love this game. It sounds like we're talking about the convicted rapist Brock Alan Turner, who now goes by Alan Turner, who has a cushy job working for his dad, who doesn't care if he has convicted rapists work for him. Convicted rapist Brock Alan Turner's dad did say it wasn't fair his son wouldn't get to enjoy steak in jail, all because of a few minutes of action. The rapist Brock Turner, who now goes by Alan Turner, is hopefully enjoying steak again, despite being a convicted rapist. I have to point this out every time rapist Brock Alan Turner gets mentioned. His dad is as big a piece of shit as rapist Brock Alan Turner. Wait, are you guys talking about Brock Alan Turner, the convicted rapist? I heard he was an okay guy, until he raped a woman and tried to claim like it was nothing. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same Brock Alan Turner, the rapist, and not his piece of shit dad. I didn't realize the convicted rapist Brock Turner had the real name, convicted rapist Brock Alan Turner, and was going by the name rapist Alan Turner now. You mean the few minutes of action that Alan Turner had with an unconscious woman and the reason it was only a few minutes is because Brock Allen Turner was pulled off the unconscious woman by two passers. That ass deserves to rot in hell. And just in case someone searches with his name spelled wrong, Alan Turner as well. I live 40 minutes south of him, and he uses the name Alan now and frequents bars in the area. My university student organization actually put out a piece about it, since he's close enough he could come to a bar near our campus. Anneli Auer. I'm sure this case is not known outside of Finland. How Wikipedia. Ogwikitu 1006 Villa, Ogwikitu 1006 Villa, homicide casts flail. Dan White getting 5 years for killing Harvey Milk and the mayor of San Francisco. Kevin Spacey. The state of Tennessee actually won the infamous monkey trial, where a local teacher was prosecuted for teaching evolution. But if anyone has heard of it today, it's generally presented as a bunch of bullying fundamentalists, trying vainly to stamp out ideas they didn't like. It's mixed for sure, but Michael Jackson went to court twice and was found not guilty, but he'll always be the butt of child molester or paradophile jokes. He only made it to court once. The civil suits were settled out of court, and the first criminal case fell apart because the witness stopped cooperating. I'm here to predict Lizzo wins in courts, but her image will never be the same, if she can win back the public opinion at all. Stella Liebeck from the McDonald's coffee case. She won her case, but she became the face of frivolous lawsuits after McDonald's campaigned to discredit her. McDonald's policy was to serve coffee so hot that it could cause third-degree burns within seconds of contact with skin, simply to discourage customers from getting refills. That's a good call, cause her public opinion has definitely shifted. I used to think she was such a positive, good-natured person, and it was so sad to hear how people were treated on tour. Fatty Arbuckle. The first acquittal of the cops who beat Rodney King. That was some preposterous bullshit. O.J. Simpson. In 1995, Simpson was acquitted of the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. However, many people believed that Simpson was guilty, and he was widely ostracized after the trial. Somehow both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Kyla Rittenhouse. Which is kind of a shame because, taken out of the political context, it was an interesting case in self-defense. It also shows that the public has no idea how laws work. I agree with the ruling. Note, I'm liberal and an attorney. The visible shift in the star witness' confidence during that interrogation was incredible. He started out very confident that he'd been prepped. Then the defense lawyer asked, "So you were pointing a gun at him when he shot you?" And there was this pause. Yes, and that was it. Really, I do think that specific point changed the whole trial. Called him a fucking pedophile of all things, because the man didn't want to use his stupid submarine. I was on a jury for a minor criminal case a few weeks ago. Looking at the evidence, the witnesses, etc., we all thought the defendant was guilty, and hell, socially and morally, they were guilty. But when we were given the actual laws for their charges, it led to a different outcome. That case was so interesting to follow simply because of the sheer amount of evidence captured on video. The prosecution was honestly fighting an uphill battle because all evidence seemed to point towards self-defense from the get-go. Said evidence was also almost entirely available to the public within days of the event as well. For me, that created a few interesting points to it. A very great many people, even when presented of video evidence, are truly incapable of parsing it without their tribal filters. If enough political will exists to do so, any trial can be made to happen regardless of merit. The self-same people from one will not be reflective about the results of two. They will not re-evaluate their discernment. That professionals formally litigated their viewpoint and effectively had it laughed out of court does not trigger epistemic humility. It simply makes them believe the courts are invalid.